Everybody, this is Dream, and before I get started in the video, if you didn't mind, could you like and then comment and subscribe? That'd be freaking awesome. Just hit the button below. Also, check the description for links to Discord and to Patreon. Join the Discord. We talk about different things. You can ask me questions. You can ask other people that are in there questions. It's fun, and there's only it's a very small community right now. Hopefully, it'll grow some. But it'd be awesome if you guys would join, and just that it really helps on YouTube too when you like and subscribe and comment. So I definitely appreciate anybody that does that. Feel free to ask any questions or comments about any of the players or any player I don't mention if you want to. That's very fine with me. So let's go ahead and get into the slate itself. We have 3 teams I think or actually 4 teams I think are pretty stackable. Toronto, Cincinnati, the LA Dodgers, and then the New York Mets. They're all in very good plus situations for their matchups and have high Vegas odds to score a lot of points. As for the pitchers that I like, Framber Valdez is my top guy for Houston. He's in the best matchup, and he's going up against the weakest team on the slate in Detroit, or at least one of their weakest ones. And he's been pretty solid this season. Now, his one game against Detroit, he had 17 fantasy points against, and I think he can probably do a little bit better than that this time around. As you can see, he's doing pretty good. His top, he's had a couple off games, but he does tend to get a decent amount of strikes, and he does stay in the game long enough where he can get more, even if he has a little error early on, he can come back from it. And so I like him as a good option. Spencer Strider is my second guy against San Francisco. Now, he has the advantage playing at San Francisco. It's Pitcher's Park. So he has that upside, and he has strikeout upside. He's been striking out a lot of people lately. Don't be too alarmed by his one game against San Francisco. That was at Atlanta, and that was pretty early in the season. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, it was on 6/21. So it's, it was about halfway, but it was not, since he started really doing good, he's only had a couple bad games in the mix there. So I really like him, and the Braves are, looking for some good wins in San Francisco as well. And then finally, Chris Bassett. Now, he doesn't have the strikeout upside as some of the others, but he still does have scoring upside. And I look for him to be in the 20 or so point range in this particular matchup, but he does have some risk in this because Chicago sometimes has good games against him. Then a couple other guys I'm just going to mention. John Gray for Texas against Miami, simply because he's going against Miami, who's one of the worst hitting teams in the country in the last few weeks. And then also Tyler Alexander against Arizona, who is a pretty decent team, but he's done good against them. He's averaged 25 fantasy points in the 2 games against them, but he doesn't get the strikeouts usually, so that kind of caps his potential. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the players themselves. So at catcher, I have some good options here. Will Smith is my top option. He's been not batting all that great, but he still hits and does pretty good and has some good games. His price is a little bit too high, but he's still somebody you have to consider. And then if he doesn't, or if Austin Barnes plays, then he's somebody to consider as well. And in fact, I'd like Austin Barnes more. He's batting .371, 10 fantasy points a game. If he plays, he's somebody that I'll probably use in my lineup. And then we have the Toronto duo, of Kirk and Jansen, and it's kind of the same situation again. Kirk is batting .310, 8.8, which I definitely like, but I also like Jansen in this particular matchup. If he does start, he's batting .379 and 9. If I had to rank the 4 of them, I would say Barnes, Kirk, Jansen, and Will Smith, just based on production chance and home run possibility. So, and then I do have one more guy that I think is in a good matchup today if he plays, and that's James McCann for the Mets against a really bad pitcher on Chicago. He's been batting .321. Now, he hadn't had the home runs or anything, but he still has good potential and gets hits and stuff like that in good matchups. So, and he definitely has a good matchup today. At first base, I've got a few guys to talk about. 2 Hail Mary options. One of them is Michael Chavis for Pittsburgh. Now, he doesn't have the greatest situation, only because he hadn't been hitting all that well, but I still think he's a Hail Mary option in Cincinnati against a bad pitcher. And then the second guy is Garrett Cooper, and he's kind of in a similar situation that he's in a plus matchup, but he and he has been hitting the ball okay, but he's probably one of the better hitters on Miami overall. And so hopefully he can be a good option as a Hail Mary particular pick if you just need to save that money at this position. But actually, my favorite guy to save money with at first base is Spencer Steer for Cincinnati. He's only played in a few games, but he's been really good, and I think that he'll continue to be really good, so I really like him here. But if you can pay up here, then you take a look at Freddie Freeman, batting .417 the last 10 with 12 fantasy points a game. And then if you don't want to pay that much, then you could take a look at Christian Walker for Arizona against the Dodgers. He's batting .306 with 8.8 fantasy points a game. He's been hitting the ball really well, and I think he has a home run potential in this particular game. Now let's go ahead and get to second base. I got some pretty good options here. First is Marcus Semien for Texas. He's been absolutely scoring a lot of fantasy points, 9.7 the last 10, and he's doing it with base hits and stuff. Four doubles, a home run, and getting on base and stealing some bases and things like that. And I definitely like it when you got a guy that's hitting the ball well and he gets steals. That just ups his potential overall. Altuve is obviously Altuve, and he's absolutely been murdering the ball late, and he's in a gigantic plus matchup. He's batting .359, 12 fantasy points a game. Nothing to dislike about that. Justin India for Cincinnati is a guy I like. He's hitting .293 the last 10 with 9.1, and he's at home, which definitely helps when it comes to the home runs especially. So he's somebody I like against a really bad pitcher on Pittsburgh. And then Mookie Betts is somebody that you have to consider, even though his price is super expensive. I don't think you really need to go up to him, but if you got the money left over, then he's definitely somebody you can take a look at. And you can also be using the outfield. Then I've got Von Grisham, the last guy for Atlanta. I think he's in a good position to have a good game against San Francisco. Obviously, it's hard to hit home runs in San Francisco, but he's not the biggest home run guy anyway. He's a guy that likes to get hits, and especially around with the guys that are in his lineup, he has tendency to knock guys in and stuff like that. So, and he has stolen base potential as well. So with that said, that's the second base. Let's go ahead and get a third. First of all, I have Josh Young. Where'd he go? Josh Young. There we go. For Texas, he's kind of a secondary option today. He's only played in a few games, but he's been good in 2 of the 3. He had a really tough pitcher in the last 2 as well, so I think that he'll be in a really good shape to have a really big game in this particular matchup. The next guy I like is Joey Wendell for Miami. Now, obviously, he's not the most ideal situation, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well. I mean, he is in a good situation for a pitcher, but he's not in a good situation because he's on Miami. But he's still been scoring some points, and so I tend to think that he's in a pretty good situation to have a good game. One of my favorite options, actually, at this position is Escobar for the Mets. He's batting .457, 12 fantasy points a game. He was in a big old slump, and then all of a sudden he just exploded out of it and like making up for whatever he was going through. Now he's in a nice little plus matchup against Chicago, and he has the opportunity to have a big game here. And then Justin Turner for the Dodgers. He's just been really good lately, .382, 12 fantasy points a game, last 10. Somebody I really like at this position. Going into the shortstops, my first guy is Jeremy Pena for Houston. He's in a good matchup against Detroit, and he's somebody that you could probably use to stack the Houston Astros. Now, he was kind of in a slump, but he's finally started to get out of it, so he looks like he's going to have some good games in a row pretty soon, and so it might be now. Joey Wendell's the guy I mentioned already. Wander Franco is somebody that's in a good position here for Tampa Bay. He's batting .294, 7.3 last 10 in this good matchup. And then Trey Turner, who is super expensive, but he's been hitting the ball really well. 11 fantasy points a game the last 10, and has home run potential in this matchup, and especially in a high-scoring game like this. Before I get too far in here, I actually want to point out that there's 4 players that I didn't include because they have just been absolutely terrible late in the last 10, 20 games or so, and that is Lowe, Marte, Bregman, and Alvarez. All 4 of these guys, they project really well today, but you do have to be aware that none of them have really hit the ball very well recently, and so you have to be aware of that. I do have two other Hail Mary options at shortstop, and one of them is Baez for Detroit. Now, he's going against Houston. He's pretty much the only guy that looks even remotely good against Valdez, but he's still very risky because, well, he's going up against Valdez. So, it's kind of a tough matchup for him, but he does project pretty well today. And then O'Neal Cruz, he is absolutely just killing the ball. 333 last 10 games, 3 home runs, 2 triples. I don't like him against Cincinnati necessarily because of the Cincinnati's pitcher is really good against lefties. But I think that he could still potentially have a good game anyway, just because he's hitting the ball so well. So they're kind of Hail Mary options. So let's go ahead and get into the outfielders. So I have 2 Hail Mary options. One of them is Aquino for Cincinnati, who is extremely boomer bust, but he's had 3 home runs in the last 10. He's batting .324, 8.6 points per game. And as you can see, he is very boomer bust. The next guy is Bubba Thompson. He's been in the similar light where he's just kind of very boomer bust lately for Texas, but he's in a nice little plus matchup against Miami. He's batting .375 last 10, 8.5 fantasy points a game. And, he does have some zeros in there, but he's had a lot of really good hitting games. And that's what it takes sometimes. 2 more kind of Hail Mary options are Trey Thompson for the Dodgers. He hadn't been batting all that great, but he's still having some good games. And he is a guy that, you can save some money in the Dodgers stack if you need to. And then Peralta for Tampa Bay. I really like him in this matchup. He's been batting .290. He's kind of due for a home run, so I kind of look for him to potentially have an opportunity here. And then as for secondary options, I have 2. Corbin Carroll for Arizona. He's been playing pretty well. He's only got 11 games in, but he's hitting the ball really well. And he has some high upside. He hits, he's not as much of a home run upside as some of the other guys, but he does have that upside as well. He's batting very well. And then also Stone Garrett for the Arizona. They both are really good lately, but he's hitting 382, 405 in 11 games with 3 home runs. He has a lot of potential, and he's getting steals. And so he definitely has some upside, and he's super cheap. I definitely like Stone Garrett more than I like Corbin Carroll, but I think both of them are in situations where you could potentially use either one in this particular matchup. Let's go ahead and get to the top options now. We have TJ Friedel for Cincinnati. I really like Cincinnati at home against bad pitching, and he's somebody that hits the ball pretty well at home, and he has home run potential here in this matchup. He's also been hitting the ball pretty well. So 10 fantasy points a game, 300 the last 10. And then Jake Fraley is kind of in a similar situation for Cincinnati, just a home run potential hitter. He's gotten 10 home runs in his first 50 games, and we just look for that to continue. He's just been really good lately, and this is a great matchup for him as well. And then Mark Canha. Mark Canha for the Mets. He's in a very plus matchup, and he's been batting pretty good, 243, 7.2 a game, and he's got some big upside. Now he's a little bit boomer bust, but I still think he's in a good spot. And then Brian Reynolds for Pittsburgh, another guy in the Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game that looks like he's got some good upside. He has home run potential in this game, and he's kind of due. He hadn't hit one in over 10 games, and so I look for him as a good option in this bad matchup for him to potentially hit a home run. And then finally, last but not least, Ronald Acuna Jr. for Atlanta. It doesn't really matter where he's playing. He tends to hit the ball well, and he's hit against San Francisco well, and he's not really been hitting a ton of home runs, but he gets a lot of base hits and stuff like that, and he has steal potential. And so obviously he's a good player, so he's somebody I consider as well. So that said, that's what I have for this DraftKings match. Let me remind you that the FanDuel match slate does not have this Texas-Miami game, so be aware of that when you're making FanDuel lineups, but they are in the DraftKings lineups, in the DraftKings one, so make sure to recognize that because you don't want to accidentally not use a guy or try to find somebody that's not there on the other site. So thank you guys again for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day.